Hey everybody, Bill 1911 here. Hey, we're going to be doing something a little bit different today. Actually it's very different. Usually we work on guns, but what I wanted to try and get for you today was a project that you can do with your kids, just something fun. And this is for the younger ones that aren't really ready for a BB gun or a pellet gun or something like that yet. But yet you want to start training them on things like range rules, like the fire concept of the firing line and things like that. So what we found were some, these are slingshot handles that are commercially available. I mean, you can buy them, but these came from a yard sale, and so what we're going to do is refurbish these. We're going to go out and get some surgical rubber tubing, and we're going to make new pouches and put new rubber tubing on them so that they'll work again. I also wanted to show you one that was homemade out of a bicycle fork, which it's pretty simple really when you get right down to it. They just took a bicycle fork and cut it off and drilled a couple of holes in it and made a pouch out of a piece of rubber and put some surgical rubber tubing on it, and they made a slingshot, and it does work. So this thing is actually pretty stiff. Okay, this is some pretty tough tubing on it. This stuff is made, it's made by a company called TheraBand, and this particular band is very, very tough. I mean, it's hard to pull back, so it really wouldn't be suitable for little kids. So what we're going to be looking at is the different elasticity in tubings and things like that until we can find something that'll do the nice job. This one, if you take a look right here on the ends of it, this stuff is starting to rot, and once it rots like this is subject to break on you at any time and snap back at you. So we're going to go ahead and replace the tubing on this as well. So let's get started. Okay, so one of the first things we're going to have to do to refurbish this old slingshot is we're going to have to do things like clean off this old rubber that's cracked up and rotted on the end of it. And I wish I knew a perfect way to do it. Probably the best way I can think of to do it is just kind of take your pocket knife and just kind of whittle it off, I mean, I don't see much option other than that. Now, the way this is structured on here is kind of important, okay? It has an end on it that's designed to catch in this rubber tubing and hold it in place. Now you want to be careful when you're doing this, not to cut yourself, of course, but you want to get off as much of it as you can so that you can put on the new surgical tubing when you get it, okay? So sometimes it'll pop off pretty easy and other times it really won't. So you're just going to kind of have to work at it until you get it done. This one's been rotted out for a very long time and is very, very dry. I hope I didn't fall out of frame. I probably did. But you can see it's kind of a mess. So we're going to see what we can do to get this all cleaned up, and we'll go to the store and get ourselves some surgical tubing. Alright, so we just went to our local hardware store and we bought surgical tubing to do the job. Now, if I was going to do this as a project with my kids to refurbish one of these things, and that's why I'm doing the video, because it's always nice to be able to do a project with your kids and get them involved. The slingshot will mean a lot more to them if it's done like a project. I mean, you can buy them commercially, it's not a big problem. In fact, it might even be cheaper to buy them commercially. But it's a good family project that you can do with your kids. So we bought our surgical tubing, and now we're going to head home and put all this together. Another thing, if you don't have any, that you might want to pick up at the hardware store are tie wraps, and I'll show you why when we start putting this whole thing together. Okay, so earlier we prepped the ends of this to receive the new tubing. So what we're going to do now is we're going to take the end of this tubing and we're going to kind of wet it with a little bit of soap and water. We just put liquid hand soap into an old pill bottle and put some water in it and shook it up. So what that's going to allow us to do is to make this tube kind of slippery on the outside. All right. So the beauty of this is once that water dries out, it's pretty well stuck. It doesn't really come off. So we're going to kind of just swizzle it around in here a little bit, okay? Get the end of the tube wet, okay? And here comes the hard part. Not putting the cap back on, that's not the hard part. Okay, so the hard part is we're going to take the end of this tube and we're going to get a hold of it with our fingers and we're actually going to turn the end of it inside out. Okay, now this is just regular soap and water that we put on here, so it's not going to be any kind of chemical that you have to worry about getting on your hands. So this is a pain in the neck to get this stuff started, turning it inside out. Once you can get it folded back onto itself, which like I said, that's the difficult part, then you can start rolling it backwards onto itself. So right now it's fighting me pretty hard. So I think what I should probably have done is get it started first. Okay. And then put it in the water so it'll slide on itself. Because like I said, getting it started like that is the hard part. Now I'm going to take it apart and show you again, boy what a nightmare that is, how I'm doing this. Okay. So I'm going to simply take my fingernails, my thumbnails, and I'm going to stick them down inside the tube and pull like that, and then twist it inside out like that and kind of work it until I get it started. Once I've got it started, I can start rolling it back onto itself like this, and it will go. The problem is the further down you go, the stickier it gets on the outside of this tube. So that's when we're going to want that soapy water so it will slide on itself and we can work it back a little easier. Okay, so we're going to dip it in there, okay, and we're going to start pushing together. And as we push, we should get that end to roll down, all right? All right, keep going. Once we feel that we've got enough of this rolled down onto itself, we should be able to stick it right onto the end of that bar sticking out there and then unroll it and it'll wrap onto itself nice and tight. So this is the hardest part of the whole thing, is getting this pushed back onto here. Starting it and getting it moving is kind of a pain in the butt. But once you really get it going, it starts to move. All right, we're getting close. A little further and we're going to have this. Now the leads on this only have to be about 12 inches long. We're almost long enough to get there, but we want to get a little bit more on it, okay, so we can get this done. All right. So we're going to keep rolling and twisting and pushing together, and it will move. I know it moves slow. This is a pain in the neck. But again, this is a project that, you know, it's funny when you do things like this with your kids, they appreciate it. They actually enjoy the fruits of the labor together with their parents more than you would expect them to. I mean, they really get into this. And so this will become kind of a prized possession for them because they built it with mom and dad, you know. As I've said before, these are definitely available commercially. It's not like you can't get them, because you absolutely can. I've shown in one of my other videos BB guns that are made by the same company, Marksman, okay? And they work very well. All right, so we've got this about long enough to reach to where we want to go. So What I'm going to do now is I mixed up some soap and water earlier, and I'm going to put a little bit on these ends. Just dip them in there just so they're a little bit damp, okay? And put the cap back on because I know myself, I'll knock this over sure as the dickens. All right, and then we should be able to kind of twist this and shove it up onto that end. Once we get it started like that, now we can unroll this end piece that we had rolled previously down onto this handle, which of course it's fighting me. I mean, we wouldn't expect anything else. But as you can see, this is already tightening up on here to the point where it's going to hold for us. All right, there we go. We're getting it. Okay, a little bit more, and we've got it done, almost. See, I seem to have gotten kind of a double roll in here, which I didn't want, but it's going. All right, so a little bit more, and we've got it. Okay, come on, baby. Come on, come on. It's almost there. And as you can see, it's a bit of a fight, but once it's on there, it's on there. It's not coming off. It's solid. So that's what you want. You don't want this to snap back on you. So from here, we're going to get about a foot long. But remember, we have to make a little leather pouch. And when we make that little leather pouch, we're going to want to be able to turn back a little bit of this, okay, and then kind of hook it together. All right, and once we've done that, I'll show you how to do that. We're going to use tie wraps on it, and we're going to crank them down on there nice and tight, and they will hold that in place. Okay, now you can tell how long just by simply taking the thing and pulling it about to your shoulder, okay? Once it's arm's length like that, that's about what you want, okay? Remember, your kids are going to be pulling this, so you can make it shorter, and you probably get more power out of it, but that's an equation you kind of have to figure out for yourself. Power versus how strong your child is to pull this thing back. So I'd say about 12-inch leads, okay? Okay, so we've got an old piece of leather strap here, okay? An old shoe, an old leather shoe, if you have one laying around, you can, it's worn out, of course, you know. You can sometimes cut a piece out of the tongue, like an old leather combat boot, anything like that you've got laying around the house. And you can cut out a piece of maybe about 2.5 inches long. This is going to be your pouch where you're going to put your rock or whatever you're going to shoot through the slingshot. Goes right here in the middle where you can pinch it together, okay? So what we're going to do is we're going to cut a couple little holes in here. Now I already cut one that you can see here, and I'm going to show you how I did that. Now what's going to happen is your surgical tubing is then going to fit through that hole, okay? And we're going to pull off about 1 inch of it, okay? And then we're going to wrap it back onto itself, and then we're going to put 2 tie wraps very tightly around this to hold this together, okay? But before we do that, we of course have to cut the holes so that the tubing can go through. If you cut the hole too small, it's hard to get the tube through. If you cut the hole too big, it weakens the pouch. So make the tube or the hole about the same width as the tube in its relaxed form, okay? So that's about how big you're going to make it. Don't get it too close to the edge because that's also going to weaken the pouch, okay? You want 1/2 to 3/8 of an inch away from the edge. Now, the way I cut into this was you can do a couple of things. One thing you can do is kind of fold the leather, okay? Now I'm going to get out my trusty dusty pocket knife. All right, and it's pretty sharp. Now you want to do this very carefully. I wouldn't let your young children do this because you don't want them to get cut. But what you're going to do is you're going to kind of saw into this just until you get all the way through the leather, okay? From there, you can put this like on a hard board or something like that, something like this, and then you can take the tip of your knife and just kind of cut around until you get the shape hole that you want, the size hole that you want, okay? And cut through that leather like that, okay? And once you've got a good hole started on it, you can sometimes, if the leather, sometimes the leather won't cooperate with you because it's too tough, but sometimes you can actually take a little pair of scissors, if you've got an extremely sharp pair, and put them through here and cut it. Now the only problem with using the scissors is that the leather will dull the dickens out of them. I mean, it'll really take the edge off your scissors. So I wouldn't do this with your good sewing scissors, Mom, or you know, whatever, your good scissors. I wouldn't use them. So, but once we get that hole cut in it, okay, and we get it all the way through, we can kind of remove that little piece in the middle, and it will come out. Sometimes you got to cajole it a little bit, but you'll get it, okay? And once it's out, you've got your holes cut in both ends, okay? And from there, you can add your surgical tubing through this pouch on both sides. So the way we're going to do that is we're just going to kind of squeeze it, stick like a corner of it through that hole, because it's going to be a tight fit, all right? We want it to be a fairly snug fit. And then you're just going to kind of grab it and work it through until you've got that rubber hose all the way through. If your hole is too small, you can always expand your hole a little bit. Okay, now this hole appears to be a little bit small, so I'm going to make it just a hair bit bigger. Use the same technique. I'm just going to cut a little bit larger slot out of it. Okay, not much. Okay, so once we get it cut, we'll try it again. All right, so we're almost there. Okay, so that makes my hole just a little bit larger, and we're going to use the same technique. We're going to stick a corner of it through until we can get a hold of it, and then we're going to work it through that hole. Once we get it all the way through, we're going to pull off about 1 inch. Now, we're going to do both sides before we put the tie wraps on them to attach them permanently, okay? So the reason why we want to do both sides is because we want to be able to adjust it so that the patch is supported dead center in the middle of these two leads. Otherwise, what happens if you've got one lead shorter than the other is that it'll tend to snap sideways and it won't go through the center cleanly and give you a clear shot. So we do one side at a time. All right. Come on, get through there. Put the corner through. Pull in what we need to get that pouch to where it's centered. Now you want to put your finger in the middle of the pouch and just pull it back to where you've got tension on it. And if you'll look, you can see that when I'm centered up, I'm a little short on this side yet. So I'm going to pull a little bit more through, okay? And I'm going to try the same thing again until I feel like I've got it adjusted to the middle, okay? And once I've got that adjusted, that's when I'm going to get my tie wraps and fold these around and make this pouch permanent then. All right, so I'll be right back. I'm going to go get the tie wraps and we'll do that. Okay, we're back with our tie wraps and we're going to do our fold over and lock these in permanently, okay? Now, I'm going to show you some things about tie wraps that are very important, okay? If you take a tie wrap and you put it around here and you simply pull it tight as you can get it, and then you just kind of cut it off, what'll happen is that the little tail that sticks out on this tie wrap right here is going to be very, very sharp. Well, we don't want it to be sharp. We want it to be nice and smooth. So I'm going to pull it nice and tight, like that, okay? And then I'm going to take my regular pliers here, and I'm going to grip it up close, and I'm going to kind of roll it a little bit like that, and it'll actually pull it a little bit tighter, okay? Tighter than I can do it by hand, okay? Once I've got that done, I'm going to slip this all the way up to the end, okay? I'm going to slip it all the way to the end, and we're simply going to twist, okay? And keep twisting, okay? And what'll happen is that end will twist off, and when it does, it twists off nice and smooth so we can't get cut on it, okay? So we don't want sharp edges on this thing that's flying around by our arm. So that's the way we're going to cut it off. So we're going to just double check and make sure nothing moved. All right, and it looks pretty good. Okay, I think we're pretty well centered. Looks good. All right, so we're going to take our second tie wrap and put it around here and lock it in the same way, and we're going to twist it off in the same way we did the other one. Okay, now I'm going to use 2 tie wraps to accomplish this on each side. All right, and that is just in case one of them breaks. Okay, if for any reason it breaks, you still haven't lost the project. You're still good. All right, so all right, I pulled that up as tight as I can by hand. Now I'm going to push it again. We're going to go all the way up, okay, and we're going to rock this back and forth a little bit. Now when it pulls, you'll notice that there's now a little gap between the head of the tie wrap and the pliers. Okay, that means that it did indeed move and get it tighter. All right, so once we've got it about as tight as we think we can, we're going to slip that those pliers up to the edge, lock it down, and twist it, okay? Just like we did before. And once we twist that off, it's going to leave us a nice, smooth end that doesn't cut us. All right, so we got 2 more on this, and then after we've done that, I'm also going to put a couple up here on the front ahead of this expanded part that's on here, and that's going to lock it so there's no way it's going to pull off, okay? And that is how we refurbish a slingshot that doesn't have any tubing on it anymore. So we've got, like I said, maybe $6, maybe $8 in this altogether. A lot of it's stuff we just use from around the house that we have, and we've got a slingshot that will do a job, okay? So that's how to refurbish your Marksman slingshot. Okay, so this is a TrueMark brand slingshot. It's a different brand. It has some different features on it. On these ends of the Y-shaped piece at the top, it's just flat, smooth aluminum. Now there's a couple of ways in which we can approach this that will attach our tubing. One, we can simply slide it over and go way down along here so it holds really strong. The other thing we can do, and that's what the TrueMark people looks like they did, they used like a rubber cement, okay, contact cement. Now you can get contact cement at hardware stores and places like that. So what I'm going to probably do is I'm going to probably use the first method where I put way down around 2 corners like that so it can't pull off easily, and then put some tie wraps on it to hold it. It's the same principles, so I'm not going to go through the whole thing all over again, but I did want you to see that these ends are different, okay? They're not structured in the same way as the other one was. So we're going to have to just use your brain and you know, think of a way to get the job done with a different system. I salvaged, because these bands were completely rotted out, I salvaged the leather piece that was the pouch, so I don't have to remake another one of those, all right? So we'll just use the same one when we refurbish this one, all right? We'll put new tubing on it, and it will be good as new, and it'll shoot really well. Okay, we're using the same method that we used before. We're just kind of putting our finger in the middle of the pouch, okay, and pulling it back a little bit and making sure that it's centered in the frame, okay, and that's what we want. And once we've got it centered in the frame, that's where we're going to do our double up to get it tied in. All right, so we put all our tie wraps in place. We've got everything locked down, and that's our second one is done. And I don't think we need to refurbish the third one. It is a little bit of a different technique, so I'm going to discuss it real quick. What they've done in this one is they basically tied a big knot in the end of the rubber hose, okay? And that'll work. I mean, that will hold it. It's doing the job. But I don't know if I trust that knot that well. I might do this a little differently. Remember though, this tubing has some sharp edges. So if you choose to make one out of a bicycle fork like this one, you're going to have to take extra care to make sure that you cut off all these sharpened edges and little burrs that stick out. Otherwise, your young one could get hurt on that. So they used a piece of plastic tubing and a couple of caps in here to finish off the handle, which is fine. But really, they didn't finish the ends of these tubes very well, and that concerns me on this. Whenever you're doing something with a piece of metal like this, all of these little edges can get very sharp, and they can cut this hose and make it snap. And if it snaps on this end, it's going to come back at whoever's pulling it, maybe hit them in the face. So one of the things you're going to want to make sure you do is use eye protection if you're using a slingshot, because if one of those straps should happen to break and come back at your face while you're sighting it, it's possible to get an injury from it. So we don't want that to happen. So it's just a matter of taking care, be careful, be aware of things like these sharpened edges that are on here. We'll see you next time. Hey everybody, Bill 1911 here. If you found this video to be helpful and informative, don't forget to like us, and please subscribe, and by all means come to visit us at askbill1911.com. Also, I want to talk to you about something that's very important to us, and that's your safety. So please, don't try any of the things you see on our videos until you have thoroughly reviewed and understood our safety procedures. If you're under 18 years of age, do not try any of these topics without the express permission of your parent or guardian. Thank you.